So welcome to the day 3 of our Unix commands discussion. In this session we'll again go through couple of commands and then understanding about the path conventions in Unix, understanding the absolute and relative path names. But to get started off with, let's understand how mkdir command works in case of Unix. In general, mkdir command lets you create directories. So when you want to create directories or folders, we'll be using mkdir command as such. Then mkdir in its generic format is written as mkdir followed by options if any, followed by the directory list that you would like to create, which means the moment I say directory list, it automatically means I can mention one or more than one directories to be created. If I say mkdir dir 10, 11 and 12, for dir 10 I didn't mention any path. So the default assumption is I want to create it in my current working directory. Same for dir 11 in this case. Since I didn't explicitly mention the path, Unix would assume that I would like to create it something like this within my current working directory. And same for dir 12. Since I didn't explicitly mention the path here as well, it would assume that I want to create directory 12 in my current working directory. So if I run this, so I am logged in onto my Unix server as the user named Dick, who is a member of the group named Dick itself, called as a private user group. Before I run this, there is no dir 10, 11 or 12 for that matter. When I do this and I say ls, you see these directories got created. Now where? Since there was no path name mentioned explicitly into my command, all of them got created in my current working directory. Then if I would like to create some directories such as within countries, I want to create a subdirectory called as states, and within states I want to create subdirectory called as districts, and within districts I would like to create a subdirectory called as cities. See how I would have created it step by step. So currently I am in my home directory and I would like to create this directory tree structure. So it's a nested directories. So I said mkdir countries. Then I go to countries. So my current working directory is now home directory containing a subfolder called as countries, and I am currently present in that directory. Again I would have said states. Then I would have moved to states. Then currently I am in my home directory countries and states as the current folder. Again I would have said mkdir districts. Then I would have gone to that folder called as districts. Here I would have created cities. Then I would have gone into cities if I wanted to navigate to that particular folder, which means it's a pretty troublesome set of commands that I need to type to create that ultimate directory. This is where the options of mkdir command would come handy. For this, create each directory, countries, states, districts and cities separately. But since they were nested directory tree structures, every time I create a parent folder, I have to jump into it and then create the child. Then jump into the child and create the grandchild. And then jump into that grandchild and create the great grandchild. So on this way, I have, or rather following this method, I have managed to create all those directories. See what could have been an easier alternative. I am getting rid of all those directories using rm-fr command. I know we haven't dealt with so far about the rm-fr command, but in short it recursively deletes everything that I mentioned beneath. So I said recursively delete everything that appears under the folder countries. Everything was removed. Now there is no more countries, states, districts and cities inside it. Now what if I wanted to accomplish the same thing using one single command? Then I would have done it something like this. Without P option, if I try this, see what happens. I said mkdir countries, states, districts and cities. It says mkdir cannot create directory, country, states, districts, cities, no such file or directory. Understand first what is that my command was trying to do and why it failed. My command was trying to create a directory. Which one? It was trying to create a directory named cities. That's the last argument in my command. So this is the path where I said create a directory called as cities. But where it should be created? It should be created within countries, within states, within districts, and this is where I was planning to create the folder, the directory cities. The command has errored out saying, well, I couldn't find districts, I couldn't find states, and I couldn't find countries. That is why my command has failed. Now in such cases, I know that cities has a parent called as districts, and district has a parent directory called as states, and state has a parent directory called as countries, and all these parent directories are missing. So obviously I cannot create a child in a non-existing parent directory tree. In such cases, one can make use of -p option to create missing parent directories on the path. So what I was planning to create? Cities, which is the parent for cities, districts, which is the parent for district, states, and which is the parent for states is countries. So if there are any missing parent directories on the path, create them as well, is what I am telling to my mkdir command using -p option of mkdir. Once I do this, there is no problem. Now I can directly jump into that whole directory path, and that's it. I am pretty much here. Understand one more time. For countries, explicitly I didn't mention any path. So it assumed that when the path is not mentioned, the path will be assumed as my current working directory, and when I typed that command, my current working directory as user dict was my home directory /home/dict. So since no path was mentioned, it has assumed that in my current working directory I am supposed to create countries, and then within countries there is no such confusion for states, because for states it lies within countries, and there was no such confusion for districts as well, because it lies within states, which is part of within countries. And then there was no such confusion again for cities, which is part of districts, which is part of states, and which is part of countries, and countries, which is part of my current working directory. So mkdir command -p would create missing parent directories if any. In our case, those missing parent directories are countries, states, and districts. So all of them got created using one option. So I don't have to write now a set of commands to accomplish the task. Earlier the same thing was done by saying mkdir countries, cd countries, mkdir states, cd states, mkdir districts, cd districts, followed by mkdir cities. I don't have to write a bundle of commands. Instead I could have done, or I could have created a nested directory tree structure using a -p argument, which creates missing parent directories if any. Now this is going to be one of the substantial discussions for the day today, that is understanding the paths in Unix, and which is quite different than what we see in general in Windows. In Windows, when I go to my computer, which acts as an entry point, I see various disk or disk partitions formatted and mounted, and often referred to by some drive letter. The drive letter in my case here is C drive, D drive, E drive, which indicates my CD or DVD ROMs, And then I also have a network map location, which is a Z drive, which is a some other machines folder mapped to my machine using uh, the CIFS protocol, Common Internet File System, or in Unix we call it as Samba protocol, which is for Windows to Unix access. So I managed to mount some shared folder which is coming from some another machine to my machine. Well, that's not the point. The point is each of those locations are pointed to by some drive letter convention, and then I can navigate within that particular thing by saying drive letter followed by the file system structure under it. So I said take me to Z drive within Oracle study docs. First I have to change my drive, and then it takes me to that particular folder. So in Windows, everything or multiple disk would have multiple entry points to access files within them. So my file would either be under an entry point C dollar or C colon, or it could be under say D drive, for that matter D colon. So there are multiple entry points to your Windows file system. Using the drive letter, you can then traverse down that particular tree which has an entry point as C drive, D drive, so on and so forth. In Unix, however, this is categorically different. In Unix, everything starts at the root of the file system, which I said is indicated with a forward slash. So wherever I am, currently I am here, I can jump onto the root of my file system by using this forward slash. If I check my location now, see where I am. I am on the root. The very entry point of your file system is where I am. Everything, multiple disks that you might be using or whatever partitions that you might have mounted, everything will fall under root. There wouldn't be any peer level entries like C drive has a peer level entry like a D drive. Everything here in case of Unix would start with a root. That is the root of the file system. It indicates the beginning of your file system. Now if I see in this particular case, I am using some command, and you see this is a different disk and this is a different disk. But even for the different disk named Dev-SDA3, which is a different disk connected to my Unix Linux machine, ultimately the path starts with a root. Whether it's Dev-SHM, ultimately the path starts with a root. And wherever my root is, ultimately the path starts with a root. So that's what is an important understanding for those who are learning Unix or Linux for the first time, that any file that you refer to within Unix is somewhere under root. There is no other possibility that my file is above or beyond the scope of root. Everything will be under root. So every command in Unix that operates on a file or a directory has to be mentioned with some path. So whenever I want to access some file, whenever I want to mention some directory, you obviously need to mention some path. When you do not mention a path, then it is assumed that your file is under the current working directory. If the path is missing, Unix assumes the default path, which is always the current working directory, which in command syntaxes can be denoted with a shortcut called as a dot, a period. Path can be mentioned in two ways. So when it comes to referring to a particular file in Unix, you can follow two different path conventions called as absolute path or relative path. So when it comes to mentioning a directory or a file path, you have an option either mention that file or directory using an absolute path, or mention the same file or directory using a relative path. Understand what's the difference? In absolute path, here the path would always start with the root of the file system, that is slash. So whenever your path to a file or to a directory starts with the first character as forward slash, it immediately automatically means that you are using a absolute notation to that file or absolute path name. For example, if I wanted to create a file named another.txt, something under this particular directory tree, I would have mentioned the path something like this. So I'm creating a file. So understand where I am currently. I am in the same directory. If I wanted to create a file, I would have better said, or rather I should create pune.txt. What is the path to pune.txt? Not mentioned. When it is not mentioned, then it assumes to be current working directory, and my current working directory is this. So when I create this, you would see under my present working directory district cities, it has created an empty file called as pune.txt. Since I didn't mention any path, it has assumed a path relative to my current position, and my current position is I am under the folder cities. So it has created a file with respect to my current position, relative to my current position. But if I wanted to create a similar file, say mumbai.txt, but my path starts something like /home, /disk, /countries, /states, districts, cities. In this case, the path to that file is starting with a slash. In this case, this particular notation is called as absolute path notation, because my path is starting with the root. So there is no ambiguity now. I am telling the exact location beginning from the root where I want to create the file mumbai.txt. So there is no ambiguity. But when I say create a file pune.txt, where will it be created? It depends where I am. If I am under cities folder, it will be created there. If I am elsewhere, it will be created in that particular location. So understand this. Whenever the path of a given file or a directory starts with the first character as root of the file system, such path is called as an absolute path. Now understand what is a relative path. Here the path starts with respect to your current or present working directory. I didn't mention any path for my file.txt, so it assumes my current working directory. Wherever I am as of the moment of typing this command, the file will be created there, which means it is relative to my position in the file system. That's why the path conventions are called as relative path names. So consider a case. If I type touch pune.txt, it will create this pune.txt with relative to my current position, and my current position is that I am under the folder named cities. But if I go elsewhere and then use the same command, my relative position is /tmp. So it would have created pune.txt with respect to my current working directory, because path is not mentioned. In this case, this particular convention is called as relative path. Now consider another case. If I want to list a file, and to that file if I mention the path something like this one. So what type of a path I am using in my command? Absolute path, because my path starts with a root. So you see here I can see that file. Well, understand where I am. I am in my home directory. To the same file, if I want to refer to using a relative notation, see how I would have typed the command. I said I am in home disk. in my current directory there is countries, states, districts, cities, Mumbai.txt. I could still see the file. Is my path here starting with a root? No. This is starting relative to my current position. That is current working directory. So I said in my current working directory there is a folder called as countries, and within countries there is a folder called as states, and within states there is a folder called as districts, and within district there is a folder called as cities, and within that there is a file called as Mumbai.txt. This path name is a relative notation. This path name is an absolute notation. So what is the difference? Whenever the path starts with a forward slash as the first character, that means you are using an absolute notation. Whenever the path does not starts with a forward slash, that means you are talking with respect to your current position. Now see here, I remove this. That means where is countries? In my current working directory, since path is not mentioned. That means I must be in an appropriate directory to be able to tell this. So I am in an appropriate directory where this path makes sense. So I am here. But consider a case that I am elsewhere. I am under root in a folder called as tmp. Can I use the same command now? No. So in my current working directory named tmp, there is no subfolder called as countries, states, districts, cities and Mumbai.txt for that matter. So with respect to my current position, the path is invalid. But if I type this command irrespective of wherever I am, will this command work? It will always work. See here. Because there is no ambiguity. It directly starts with the root and it takes you down to the ultimate element, which is Mumbai.txt as a file somewhere in my directory tree structure. But this path here was only valid until I was in a correct directory, and the correct directory was /home/dict. The moment I migrated elsewhere, that particular file name was of no meaning. Now it says within tmp there is no countries, states, districts, cities and Mumbai.txt. It's not within tmp, it was under /home/dict. Well, I am quite adamant this time that I still want to refer to that file using a relative notation. See how difficult it would be in that case. If I say, well, understand this first, where I am under tmp. So I said dot slash means /tmp, which is my current working directory. If I go by double dot, it will refer to the parent of tmp, that is root. Parent of tmp is root. Then I said go to home. Under root there is home. Then go to dict, go to countries, go to states, districts, cities, Mumbai.txt. Sorry, not cd, I would have said ls. See here, I was still able to refer to that file using a relative notation. So with respect to my current position, if I want to find out the relative location of a file, I was under tmp. So I said in my current working directory, that is /tmp, go one level up. From tmp I will go to root. Then I said under there you would find home. Then you will find dict, countries, states, districts, cities, Mumbai.txt as a file. So see here, the relative notation would change depending upon where in the directory tree structure you are. Another example, I am under var log. I am under root, var, and within var I am under log. Now from here, using a relative notation, I want to refer to my same file. Then I would have said dot to indicate my current directory, which is var log. If I go one level up, I will be in /var. If I go one level up, I would be in root. Then within root I have home, dict, countries, states, districts, cities, Mumbai.txt. See here. So how many times I am using dot double dot to reach to my ultimate file, that depends on how deep below in a nested directory tree structure you were at the time of typing this command. So when I was in a correct directory, I could refer using a relative notation like this. When I was in a different directory, I was able to refer by saying dot double dot. When I was deep down under a different directory tree structure, I could refer to the same file by saying dot double dot double dot. So the double dot refers to the parent. In short, if I want to cut short some typing effort, I could have done this. Anyways, when I don't mention the path, it assumes the current working directory. It would have still worked. Now consider one more example. I am in where spool or wherever it takes me. I want to go to some directory which allows me to navigate into. So I am in, let's say, where spool mail dick. Not a directory, it says, let's say here. So I am here. Now from here, if I want to refer to my original file using a relative path, then I would have said ls-l dot slash to indicate my current directory. This one. Typing two dots will move to my parent. That means I am now in where spool. Double dot will take me to where. Double dot will take me to root. Home, dick, countries, states, districts, cities, Mumbai. So how many double dots you use, it all depends on where you are and where you want to be. Understand this. All Unix commands work with absolute path as well as relative path. Sometimes mentioning a relative path will be easier. Sometimes mentioning an absolute path would be easier. So if I am here, how would I have typed the absolute path? Starting with the root. Now tell me, is this easy or this one easy? The second one is easy. So don't immediately conclude absolute paths are easier than relative paths. It's not the case. Now consider where I am. I am here. Now let's check the same file using absolute path. This is my absolute path. And now to the same file I refer to by relative path. Which one is easy? Absolute or relative in this case? Sometime back you said absolute is easy. Now you are saying relative is easy. That's what I said. Sometimes referring to the file using an absolute path would be easy. Sometimes referring to a file using a relative path would be easy. You must be very fluent in understanding where you are and where you want to jump to. Absolute path is meant for dumb people, where I don't know where I am and where I want to go. I only remembered what is the hard-coded location of that file in the file system. It's very dumb to mention /home, /disk, /country states, districts, cities, Mumbai.txt. When I was itself in the cities folder, I could have referred to that file simply by saying Mumbai.txt. Clear? So sometimes absolute path would be easier, sometimes relative path would be easy. So you must be comfortable with both. Consider a case. Now understand this. Here are a couple of examples. You are here, means your present working directory says home user 30 dir1. You want to touch a file, this file in this path. So you want to create this file in this path. See in an absolute method how I would have referred to. I would have said touch /home /user 30 /countries /states districts cities, this file. No ambiguity. I have given the ultimate path right from the beginning of the file system. But now comes the relative path. Where I was here. So how I would have mentioned this thing? Double dot would have taken me to this one. And then further to that I have simply mentioned the path. Now you are here. How would I have mentioned? Created the same file using absolute path? No change. irrespective of wherever I am in the file system structure. But with a relative path, how I would have mentioned this thing? Double dot would have taken me here. Double dot would have taken me here. And double dot would have taken me here. So I have used 3 times double dot. So where I am ultimately now? Here. And then I said within user 30 there is country, states, districts, cities, so on and so forth. Now I am under here. Home, user 30, dir1, my dir, your dir. Now I want to create a file, this file under tmp. Then I would have said with an absolute path by saying under root there is a folder named tmp, and under tmp touch this file.txt. But with a relative path, I would have said double dot would have taken me to my dir, double dot would have taken me to dir1, double dot would have taken me to user 30, double dot would have taken me to home, double dot would have taken me to root, and then under that I am going to tmp. So how many double dots you use all depends upon where you are and where you want to go to. Double dot is a relative notation for a parent directory. So wherever you are, parent of that directory is referred to by a double dot. So people say, is it mandatory to be there in that directory? No. See here. I said ls-l /home /dic countries, states, districts, double dot, double dot, double dot. So where I am now? Where I am now? In the home directory. Then I am saying countries, states, districts, or countries, states, double dot, double dot. Where I am now? Same home directory. Countries, states, districts, cities, Mumbai.txt. So don't get bamboozled. I'm just going down, up in the same path. So I don't have to be necessarily there to refer it as a double dot. So here simply the double dot means it's applicable for this path. It would have taken me to states. This double dot would have taken me to countries. This double dot would have taken me to the parent of countries, that is dic. And then within that I said go to countries, go to states. Again I have traveled 2 steps up, that is back to dic's home directory. Again I have traversed further. So don't get confused. People say, are you insane? You are typing this path. No, this is only for learning. Nobody would type it this way in real life. This would only be typed by those who don't have any other work to do. This is just to clear the understanding of absolute and a relative path name. So I simply mentioned to the same file, well, I was here by the way. The easiest way to refer to that file could have been this way. So I said in my current directory there is a folder called as cities, and within cities there is a file called as Mumbai.txt. So understand this. It's very important for you being fluent on Unix. It's must that you understand the paths first and then understand the commands. Because all commands ultimately expect you to mention a file or a directory, and if you don't know how to mention it, it's a big problem. Next one is a cat command. Cat is an abbreviation for concat. Let's understand first how a cat command works. It can be used for many purposes. Too many things can be accomplished using cat command. Let's understand what is the default understanding of a cat. I simply say cat followed by enter. So it is waiting for my input. So I said, I am clever. See what it says? It says, I am also clever. I said, I am insane. It also says, I am insane. I said, I am dead. It also says, I am dead. Understand the way the command works first. So to understand the default behavior of cat command, you need to understand first the standard input device and the standard output device. By default in Unix, the standard input device is keyboard. The standard output device is the console, the screen, the monitor, whatever you call it in general as of now. So whatever I provide as an input from the standard input device, keyboard, it is displayed as is on the standard output device, the console, monitor or screen, isn't it? So whatever I typed in, I am clever. It has simply echoed me back the same thing. So what is the behavior? Accept input from a standard input device and display the verbatim input as is onto the standard output device is the default behavior of cat command. How did I terminate it? I terminated it by saying Control C. So if I want to terminate a running command in Unix, press Control C to abruptly halt that command. So what is the default behavior? By default, the cat command would accept the input from the standard input device, which is keyboard, and would echo it to standard output device, which is console, screen, monitor, terminal, whatever you call it. As of today, it all makes one and the same thing for us. Whether I call it as a console, a screen, a monitor or a terminal, as of today it's one and the same thing for us. So this is the default behavior. Well, then what is that I can accomplish with a cat command? Nobody would be doing this, right? With its own simplest form of a cat command, would you be typing something to be echoed back to you? In real life, it doesn't make any sense. Well, then cat command can be used to see the contents of a file or create a file. What is a more realistic purpose of a cat command? A more realistic purpose is either to see the contents of a file or to create a file itself using a cat command. Okay, let's see what are the different usages of the cat command. This time I am using cat command to create a file. To create a file using cat, say cat output redirection to some file name. So see here, I said cat redirect the output to some file name. So I said cat output redirect to some file name. In its default format, what it does, it accepts the input and echoes it back to the, redirects it to the standard output device, which in your case is monitor. So it accepts the input and redirects to the monitor. This time I said do not redirect to the monitor, redirect it to a file. So there is no such file as of today with the name myfirstfile.txt. I am checking. Is there any file before? No such file. So this file will be created after I run the command. So I said run this then, followed by enter. Now it's waiting for my input. Well, I am saying this file was created using cat command. This is the second line of the file. The file ends here. Well, I am done with my typing. If I wouldn't have redirected it, what would have happened? Every time I type and press enter, the same line would have echoed to my screen. That is the default behavior. Accept from standard input and display it to the, redirect it to the standard output. But this time I have categorically asked it not to redirect it to the standard output. Redirect instead to a file. Well, once I am done, press Control D to indicate end of input. So I said Control D. My file, let's see, has it been created? Earlier the same file was not there. Now the file got created. I said cat, this one, see here, whatever I typed then was all redirected to my file. So understand this. Here I said cat followed by file name. This is to display the contents of a file on standard output device. This was to create a file by redirecting the input to the file. So I said cat followed by first file using output redirection. This is my first file, whatever. I said indicate the end of input by pressing Control D. This will create a file called as first file.txt. To see the contents of a file is the second use of cat command. Simply say cat followed by the file name. It will read the contents of that file and will display everything to the standard output device, which is the screen. You could have also used -n command, option rather, of cat. See what is the difference. Each line is now numbered. So here there was no numbering. Now this time each line is numbered. So on the left edge I can see the line numbers as well. So -n prints the contents of a file on your standard output device with line numbers on the left edge. Using cat command to copy the contents of one file to another. This is the third use of cat command. So I can copy the contents of one file to another. See how. I said cat input redirection from my first file. So I said by default cat expects input to come from keyboard. I said don't expect the input to come from keyboard. This sign is for input redirection. This sign is for output redirection. So I said read the input from my first file.txt, and if I don't do anything and press enter, what would happen? Default behavior is to display it on screen. So it has displayed me on the screen. Is this what I want to do? No, I want to copy the contents to some other file. So I said some or rather copied.txt. So see how the command is working. I said by default cat expects the input to come from standard input device keyboard. Here I said don't expect it from the keyboard, expect it from the file. The default behavior is to redirect the input to where? Standard output device, which is your monitor. I said don't redirect it to the monitor, instead redirect it to the file. So let's see, are these two files exactly identical in size? See here the size of both the files is 98 bytes. I am checking my original file. I am checking the copied over. See here, they are exactly identical. So what is the purpose that we use cat command in this case? Using cat to copy the contents of one file to another. So I redirected it from input redirected second.txt to cat, and output redirected it to the copy of that particular file. This file, if it does not exist, it will be created. If the file is already there, it will be overwritten. Very important. See here, one more time. This is what is there in my file, my first file.txt. I said cat redirect to first file. This is line 1. Understand the way it works. If the file my first file.txt already exists, it will be overwritten. If the file does not exist, it will be created with whatever I am typing. I am done. I press Ctrl D. Now I check what is there in this file. The previous contents are all overwritten. So people say, oh, no, I don't want to overwrite it. I want to add to the same file. See what to do in such cases. Instead of using output redirector, use append operator. So in this case, I am appending to the same file. So I said this is line 2. Done. Now if I check the contents of this file, the previous contents are also preserved and the new contents are appended to the end of that file. Clear? So in this case, instead of using a single output redirection marker, I have used a double output redirection marker, which is actually an append operator. Next usage, merging the contents of few files into one particular file. See here, I said cat 1.txt. That's it. I said cat 2.txt. That's it. I said cat 3.txt. That's it. So I have created 1, 2 and 3 as 3 files. Let's see. 1.txt, 2.txt, 3.txt. What if I want to merge the contents of 1, 2 and 3 to some file? See what I am doing now. I said cat 1.txt, 2.txt, 3.txt, redirect it to all.txt. Now I check all.txt. Clear? Now I want to again redirect the output. What will happen? It will overwrite my previous file. But instead, if I say this one, to the existing contents of all.txt, the contents would be again merged together and appended. Now I am checking all.txt. See what it says? 1.txt, 2.txt, 3.txt. Again 1.txt, 2.txt. Why it came again? Because instead of a single output redirection operator which would have overwritten my file, I used a double greater than sign, which is an append operator. So to the existing contents, it has added the new contents to it. So merging the contents of files into a single file is what we have accomplished here. Using cat command to copy the contents of one file to another using an append operator. This we have already discussed. So instead, it will not overwrite copy of second.txt, it will append to the existing contents of copy of second.txt. Merging the contents of few files into one file using append operator. This also I have discussed just now. So you can merge more than one files using an append operator in both .txt. So existing contents of both .txt would be preserved. On top of that, it would also add to the end of it the contents of first.txt and second.txt in the same chronological order, the way you mentioned it. Greater than sign is an output redirection with overwrite of target. Double greater than sign is an output redirection with the append of the target. Less than sign is an input redirection. So same cat command can be used for multiple things. In its simplest form, generally cat is used to see the contents of a file in general way. So in general world, people at the max use cat like this or cat like this. But there are multiple other usages also. As I said, it can be used to do a lot of miraculous things. So just not to see the contents, but to create a file, to copy the contents of one file to another, to copy the contents of one file by appending into the another, by copying the contents of more than one files by overwriting the target, by copying the contents of more than one files by appending to the target. So there are multiple different usages of the cat command. But in its most simplest format, whatever it accepts as an input, it displays it onto the output device is the general behavior of cat command. further we tweaked it to our own benefit. So instead of reading the input from keyboard, we said input redirection, read it from the file. Instead of echoing it onto the screen, redirecting it to the standard output device, which is a monitor, we said redirect it to a file. How you redirected it? Either by using a single greater than sign, by overwrite of target, or by using a double greater than sign, by append of the target. Next is copying files and directories in Unix. CP followed by options, followed by source file, target file. So see here, I am back into my home directory. These are the files. I want to copy 1.txt as copy1.txt. Now if I see both the files, both are exactly identical. Now remember, if I modify going forward 1.txt, changes will not be reflected in copy of 1.txt, isn't it? Because these two are separate files. How do I know if they are separate files? I am using ls-li command, where I displays me the inode number, and from the inode number I can make it out that they are not the same files. They are two distinguished entities. Clear? So if I make changes to 1.txt, don't expect those changes to be in copy 1.txt, but they are pretty much there in your file 1.txt. So copy first.txt to some another first file. Again, back to the basics of all the path names and everything. Did I mention where is 1.txt? No. That means it will assume it under current working directory. Did I mention where is copy 1.txt? No. That means it will assume it in under current working directory. See another version. So I said, what is the way I mentioned path for 1.txt source? For 1.txt. For the source I mentioned relative path. For the target I mentioned absolute path, because the path is beginning with root. So it has copied the file, this time however under tmp. Clear? So copy first to another. Both source and targets are mentioned with a relative path, relative path. Second case, I said copy first.txt to tmp. First was mentioned with a absolute path. Target was mentioned with a first was mentioned with a relative path. Target was mentioned with a absolute path. So I said cp 1.txt, copy it under here. Now did I mention the name for the target? I didn't mention the name. So what would be the name of the file? 1.txt. Same name is preserved. See here. Same example, but not just that I want to copy, I also want to change the name of the file. So I said, did I mention any path for the source? No, that means it's a relative path. Did I mention the path for the target? Yes. How? Absolute path. But the bug doesn't stop here. Ideally I would have stopped it by saying /tmp/. But then the file name that would have been created under tmp would have had the same name, first.txt. So I just don't want to copy it under tmp. I want to also copy it with an alternate name. So the first.txt gets copied into tmp with the new name copy of first.txt. So it was like copy and rename it also. Copy /tmp/first.txt to just a copy.txt. Now in this case, the source is mentioned with a absolute path. Target path is missing, that means target is assuming relative path. Here I am using the source as a absolute path, target also as a absolute path. So understand this. Source and targets, depending upon your requirement, can either be mentioned as absolute path or could be mentioned as relative path or could be mixed. Source could be absolute, target could be relative. Source could be relative, target could be absolute. Both could be absolute, both could be relative, whatever. So that's why I said understanding of path in Unix is even more important. It shouldn't confuse you what exactly is the command trying to do. Now when copy was designed, copy was only designed to copy files, not directories. See here, I am in my home directory. I want to copy. This is what? Directory. I want to copy countries as countries underscore new. See what it says. Copy cannot copy directories. Well, if you want to use cp command to copy directories, then you must say R. R for recursive. So I said countries to new countries. See here now, there is countries underscore new. So R for recursive copy not just copies the top level file, but everything that lies within that directory structure, everything is would get copied over to the new directory tree structure. So see here, I am going to new countries, states, districts, cities, and the files within it. So understand, cp-r recursively copies a directory to another structure. Well, when I use this cp command here, I didn't mention the path for both. So it will assume both to be under current. If I would have mentioned something like, here my source is relative, target is absolute. So I go to /tmp, countries, states, districts, cities, and I see everything is there. So hyphen small r is for recursive copy. One could have also used capital R. So small r or capital R acts as the same switch, that is for recursively copying the contents. The next command is even more interesting. That is to rename or relocate file or directories using mv command. So remember, Unix does not have two commands to do this particular thing. We are actually trying to accomplish two things. Either to rename a file or to relocate a file. But there aren't two commands for this purpose. In Unix, a single command helps you accomplish both the things. That is either to rename or to relocate or do both. You can rename or relocate a file or a directory using mv command. In general, it's written as mv source followed by target. So either source or target or both could have been mentioned in any of the styles, absolute or relative path. First, let's try to understand when mv command works as rename and when it would work as relocate. If the source and the target paths are same, then the mv command would work as rename. So if my source file path and the target file path are same, then the command will work as rename. See here, I am in my home directory. There is a file called as copied.txt. So I said mv copied.txt to xyz.txt. Now understand first. First we'll try to understand in which path convention styles I mentioned the source. It's in relative style. What is the style used for the target? Relative. So both source and targets are mentioned as relative. Since I didn't mention path for source and target, the default assumption is source and target are both into my current working directory, which is /home/dict. Are the paths same? Next question is the path for source and target the same? Yes. If answer is yes, it will act as a rename. Now I check. Now I don't see copied.txt anywhere. Instead I see xyz.txt. So copied.txt was renamed and the new name for the same file is xyz.txt. So here it worked as rename. So I said pwd. It says you are in your home directory. I said, now let's understand this. This is even more interesting. This is my present working directory. I said mv/home/dict/xyz as // copied.txt. Don't jump onto conclusion. First, step by step. Source, absolute path or relative path? Absolute path. Target, absolute path or relative path? Relative path. Now tell me carefully, is the source and the target path same or different? Hold on. So our question is my source and target path same or different? I will pause this video. I will take a user. So although the visible appearance of /home/dict/xyz.txt is visibly different than the target ./copied.txt, here the path says the source lies under /home/dict. Target simply said dot, but the dot translates to my present working directory, which in this case is /home/dict, which means my source and the target both are under /home/dict. Since the paths are same, not visibly but the actual location wise, the command will act as rename. Very important discussion. So if the source and the target paths are same, not visibly but in actual reality, then the command mv will act as rename. So I said pwd /home/user30 mv complete path, where I didn't mention here anything. So since I didn't mention anything, first.mp3 will act like /first.mp3. Dot indicates your present working directory, which is /home/user30, which also means source and targets are in the same directory, where my command will act as rename. I said mv./first.txt and the target as /home/user30 first.mp3. Here the dot indicates my current working directory, which is this. So first.txt is under /home/user30/first.txt, whereas my target is explicitly mentioned with an absolute path. Both the directories finally translate to /home/user30. The command will work as rename. Clear? Now understand when the mv command will act as relocate. If the source path and the target path is different, then the mv command will act as relocate. So if my directories happen to be different directories, then it will act like a relocate command. So consider this thing. I said mv copied.txt. What is the path mentioned against copied.txt? No path mentioned. That means it is in my current directory. I said move it under tmp. Now where is my copied.txt? Current working directory. Where is my target mentioned? /tmp. Are they the same directories? No. That's why you no longer see copied.txt. Instead, copied.txt is now have moved under tmp. Clear? So when the source and the target paths are different, the mv command will act as relocate. One more time. See here, I am under countries, states, districts. I said mv cities mumbai.txt. 2 slash home slash dict countries, states, districts, cities, new mumbai.txt. Will it act as a rename or relocate? Rename, because ultimately the folder happens to be the same folder. So when I do this and I go here, there is no more mumbai.txt. Instead there is new mumbai.txt, which is renamed, because ultimately visibly the path may be different, but then ultimately it translates to the same directory. If it's the same directory for source and target, the command will act as a rename. If the source and target happens to be in a different directory, irrespective of the way I mentioned the path, it will act as a relocate. Now see how I can do both in one command. A single command doing both. I said mv all.txt. I didn't mention the path. That means all.txt is in my current working directory. I said do not only move it to elsewhere, also with an alternate name. So what I have done here, I have relocated from my current working directory all.txt to a new location /tmp with a new name, new all.txt. So rename and relocate in one single command. Clear? So don't be bamboozled with the way the paths are mentioned. You must always consider your working directory, and with respect to that you need to take your decisions. So see here, I am going to var log, and then I said mv dot slash dot 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 home dict copy1.txt to slash home slash dict slash countries, states, dot 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 slash new copy1.txt. Now tell me, is it rename relocate invalid command? Or an invalid command? So the interviews will test you not on tell me how a mv command works, but something like this thing which helps you, which forces you to think. Now this is very interesting. Where I am in var log. So what does this dot indicates? Var log. Double dot will take me var. Second double dot will take me root. Next double dot will take me father of the root, grandfather of the root, great grandfather of the root, great great grandfather of the root. Remember, the highest entry point to your file system is root. So no doubt you use any number of double dots after that. It will ultimately keep you on the root, because there is no boss, there is no parent folder for the root. So I said finally under root there is home dict copy1.txt, and then I said in a more absolute way, a more confused looking path which says home dict country state dot 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 dot, means where I am ultimately, I am in slash home slash dict new copy1.txt. Now tell me, is it relocate or rename? It's ultimately rename, because ultimately the path of source is slash home slash dict and the path of target is also slash home slash dict. Don't worry about the way I mentioned it. I go to my home directory. There is no more copy1.txt. Instead there is new copy1.txt. So here it acts as a rename. So very important discussion in today's session. And I also explained you relocate and rename in one single command. Well, we'll end our discussion here. Tomorrow, rather in the next session, We'll be even discussing further on to interesting topics. Understanding permissions in Unix. So what are the parties? What are the permissions? And what each of those permissions means for a file or for a directory would be our new interesting discussion. Those who miss this session, for them Unix going further becomes meaningless. So thanks for joining into this session.